February Planning Committee. The first item on our agenda. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies this afternoon from Councillor Mike Lewis.
Mike, right, okay, thank you. That's item 1. Item 2 then, are there any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Anyone? No? Okay, moving on. To item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, is to approve and sign those minutes as a correct record, and that's pages 1 and 2. So I'm on page 1 and page 2. Somebody move them. Thank you very much. Item 4, are there any items for deferral or withdrawal, Chris?
No.
None, thank you. So then we move on to item 5, the determination of planning applications under the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990. And the first item on our agenda is up to Morriston to Springfield Street. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Chair. Fernando, good afternoon. Okay, this application is seeking planning consent to change the use of 90 Springfield Street from a 3-bedroom dwelling to a 6-bedroom house of multiple occupation, falling within use class C4. It will also include some fenestration alterations. So the application has been reported to committee, has been called in by Councillor Williams, and over the required number of objections, including a petition, has been received. There is an update sheet for this one, where we've had one additional representation. So this item was presented at committee back in October, where it was deferred subject to a site visit, and that visit took place yesterday. So thank you for your attendance. Since the deferment in October, it was clarified a small part of the site indicated on the plan as a parking space to the southwestern end was not owned by the applicant. So as a result, amended plans had been received to alter the extent of the application site, and the additional information on parking has been provided. At the same time, the applicant had decided to reconfigure the internal arrangement of the HMO by relocating one of the bedrooms to the basement and do some fenestration alterations as well. So the amendments were subject to further public consultation, and further representations been received, and these matters are now considered in your report that's in front of you today. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide shows the general location of the site in the context of the surrounding area. The location of the site is identified by a red circle, and is in the Morriston, which is in the northern end of the city. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a more detailed site location plan, and the site is now outlined in red. An aerial image of the application site and the street is also provided. Springfield Street is largely residential in character, but there is an isolated small commercial unit to the immediate south of the site. Most properties on Springfield Street relies on on-street parking, and there's a mixture of restricted and unrestricted spaces along the road. Next slide, please. So this is the existing floor plans and elevation of the property, and appears to contain 3 bedrooms, with the basement and loft area being used as storage. The property has a flat roof projection on the rear elevation. The property is on a sloping site, with the front elevation facing the road being the highest point and the rear elevation being the lowest point. It's effectively a split-level property, with the additional basement at the rear. The rear includes a level patio area and the main amenity space, which is currently overgrown, and beyond the rear boundary of the site is a steeply sloping parcel of land that's also overgrown. Next slide, please. So this slide, can you go back one? There you are. So this slide shows the proposed floor plans and elevation of the property. It's as amended. The proposal includes 2 ensuite bedrooms, a kitchen and a living dining area to the ground floor, and 3 ensuite bedrooms to the first floor, and an ensuite in the bedroom in the basement. The loft will be left as storage. The site plan also shows a bin store and bike store at the side and rear, and 1 parking space on one side of the property. Next slide, please. So turning to the photographs, this slide shows the image of the front elevation of the property. The small commercial unit is the red brick building on the right-hand side. Thank you. Next photograph. So this slide shows the two corresponding side elevations of the property. The two photographs on the left shows the elevation facing north and adjacent to a two-storey residential property. This elevation would involve blocking up of one window. The two photos on the right is the elevation facing south and nearest to the commercial unit, and this elevation would see two new windows being added to the ground floor. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the rearmost part of the dwelling. It includes the rear elevation and the two-storey flat roof projection, the flat patio area that's overgrown, and then the steep land beyond it, which is beyond the arched walls of the site. The rear-facing windows at the basement will also be altered. Next slide, please. This shows a couple of photographs of the immediate street scene near the site, and one looks southwards down the street and the other one looks northwards from the junction with Pleasant Street. Next slide, please. So in terms of planning history, the report explains that a planning application to change the use of the property to a 10-bedroom house of multiple occupation and a separate one-bedroom flat was refused in May last year. It was refused for several reasons, including lack of communal floor space, substandard living arrangements, insufficient car parking, overlooking from elevated windows, and visual impact of a dormer, and lack of ecological information. The application before you today is less and materially different to that of the previous application. It is solely for a conversion to a 6-bedroom, 6-person HMO, and external alterations are mainly limited to fenestration alterations. The key issues to consider relates to the principle of the HMO use, impact on visual amenity, residential amenity, impacts on community and social cohesion, and impacts on parking and highway safety. These matters have been assessed in various sections of the report. The report also summarised the public representations that have been received during the consultation of the application, which includes a petition of 81 signatures from 59 different addresses, 47 letters of objection, and the grounds of objections are varied and detailed on page 20 and 21 of the report. In terms of the principle of the use, the report makes a comprehensive assessment of the proposal against the criteria of policy H9 of the LDP, which specifically deals with HMO proposals, and this is supplemented by the HMO SPG. It also includes consultation with colleagues in the placemaking and strategic planning section and the Council's own HMO team. The report includes a map which is replicated on the slide. This forms part of the evidence in addressing policy H9. This property lies outside the Council's defined HMO management area, and as such there is a limit of 10% of all residential properties within the 50-metre radius can be HMOs. In this case, there are 38 residential properties within the 50-metre radius, and there are no HMOs within that radius. So the proposal will result in a concentration of HMOs within the 50-metre radius being 2.63%, which is below the 10% threshold. The development would not result in a Class C3 dwelling house being sandwiched between other HMOs, and it's not considered to be a small street. So the report considers the proposal will not cause a disproportionate concentration of HMOs, and therefore accords with policy H9 of the LDP and the guidance in the SPG. Whilst there may be other HMO properties outside the radius, it's not a significant factor in the determination of the application because it's assessed against current policy and guidelines. In terms of visual amenity, the alterations were limited to fenestration changes and the siting of bin and bike stores. These are quite minor in the context of things and is considered to be visually acceptable. In terms of residential amenity, the report considers that a 6-bedroom serving 6 people would meet or exceed the minimum room sizes in the SPG, and following careful consideration would have adequate amenity. The communal living areas, outdoor spaces would also achieve a high standard of amenity, and a condition has been recommended to agree certain details on the bin and cycle stores. The proposal would not involve any new extensions, and the property would mainly use existing windows. As such, the proposal would not result in any additional amenity impact to neighbouring properties with regards to light, outlook and dominance. 2 new windows would be inserted on the side elevation at ground floor level and replacement windows on the rear elevation. The report has carefully examined the impact of all windows and considered that the arrangement would not unreasonably affect the amenities and privacy of neighbouring properties, including those of Pleasant Street, which backs onto the site. Regard is also given to a high degree of mutual overlooking between properties in this hillside location, and some windows have a degree of screening present. A condition has, however, been recommended to restrict the property to a C4 use class, which also limits the number of occupants to 6. With regards to noise and disturbance, the report explains that the use of the property for 6 unrelated individuals would not have any impact in excess of a large family home. The property, although within a residential area, is also adjacent to a commercial unit, and there's separate legislation to do with statutory noise nuisance. The Council's HMO team have raised no objections, subject to advisory notes, including obtaining a separate HMO licence. The report considers that there's an overriding evidence to indicate that there's a change of use in this property to a 6-person HMO would result in any harmful effects to well-being or social cohesion within the local community, including matters of crime and antisocial behaviour. Furthermore, there's no information within the application to indicate the property would be marketed for occupation by any specific section of society. And whilst objections have been received regarding who would be living at the property, the local planning authority has no control over the residents in properties. The owner would be required to manage the property in accordance with separate legislation, such as those applicable to landlord responsibilities, including obtaining a separate HMO licence. Objections have been received regarding flooding and sewage issues. The site is not in a flood risk area, and limited information has been provided regarding the proposed change of use would increase flooding and sewage issues. The property already benefits from a residential use and is capable of accommodating a large family, which could happen at any time. Objections have been raised regarding Japanese knotweed is present, but this is mainly to the application is mainly for the change of use of an existing residential property. And if there are any invasive species within the site, it would be for the landowner's responsibility for its control. The Council's ecologist has raised no objections subject to ecological enhancements. Most properties on Springfield Street do not have any off-road parking, and there is a mixture of residents only and unrestricted on-street parking. The property benefits from 1 off-road parking space, and the local highway authority have raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions, including retaining the existing parking space and restricting the number of residents to 6. It must be noted that the Council's Parking Standards SPG advises that dwellings within use class C3 require a parking space per bedroom up to a maximum of 3, and for a HMO, 3 spaces are required for the first 6 occupants, with an additional space required per occupant above that. The report considers that the proposal would not have any greater highway impact over and above the existing extant use of the property. So overall, the report concludes that the proposal satisfies relevant planning policies and guidelines, and the recommendations to approve subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Okay, first off, we got Eleanor Cuttill wants to address the committee. In your time, please. 5 minutes.
I speak again against this application on behalf of over 100 residents of Springfield Street, Pleasant Street, Penchpoth Road, Penrose Street and Towie View Crescent. Our objections are clearly outlined in the many responses to this application, the reconsultation and the previously rejected application for the 10 beds and flats, and our Senate member also supports our concerns. This application remains fundamentally unsuitable for this location, and our previous reasons for refusal have not been resolved, just simply reduced in scale. I hope your site visit yesterday illustrated the location and topography of the property and the difficulty the application poses. Council's own planning standards set out this property should have 3 parking spaces, but this property only has the 1. The original application provided had 2 spaces, but as residents we did due diligence to point out to planning officers the inaccuracy of the application, and the applicants didn't in fact own the land for the 2nd space. They now state it's a boundary error, but as part that land is unregistered and the other is registered to the adjoining property, if the plan is to adversely possess that land, 12 years of use needs to be proven, so please do not rely on that. The 1 parking space is close to the exit for the property and neighbouring house, with wooden fences posing fire risks. Higher ways have suggested covenanting the land so that it always to remain a parking space, but surely this needs to be made safe before it can be used. It is a concealed entrance between the buildings with obstructive view for pedestrians and for the driver coming off the space to see any pedestrians or vehicles passing until they are over the pavement, which again provides serious risk. It's hard standing, but the curb's not been dropped with the council and it's not a registered crossover. The close proximity of the lamppost provides difficulty of manoeuvrability as witnessed yesterday, as well as passing through dense parking with parked cars either side and opposite. Springfield Street and the surrounding streets are narrow built over a century ago, long before cars were common, and today the streets are under significant strain with residents parking both sides of the road in every available space, including pavements. Permit parking is already at full capacity as confirmed by highways, with no driveways, so it's street parking. There's no guarantee residents can park anywhere near their homes, vehicles already pushing into surrounding streets. In the evenings and weekends, it can almost be impossible to park with densely parked cars and work vans. Some residents, particularly less mobile, feel unable to leave home late in the day for fear of losing any nearby parking. The property is located very close to the very sharp junction with Pleasant Street, with existing parking already posing risks for emergency access and road safety. It is very narrow, which doesn't allow for parking on this side of Springfield. Adding further vehicles to the immediate area would worsen the situation. There are currently 4 houses under renovation in Springfield, so once they're occupied, you can add an extra 4 or 8 vehicles. The report provided photos of a daytime visit to illustrate availability of parking. As a working area of the city, it's no surprise at 11:30 in the morning on a weekday there's some availability, as most are out at work. The photos show availability mainly in the permit bays, which are already maxed out, or at the dangerous junction with Pleasant Street. A visit after 5 or at weekend shows differently, so we provided you today with a sample of residents' photos. As you can see, it would be difficult to see how the street can support the additional vehicles. So the alternative to parking is local buses and cycling. I hope you appreciated the gradient needed to walk back from the bus stop with shopping bags, let alone cycling. It's not easy. In previous comments to this committee in October, the applicants assured us they'd be seeking professional tenants such as doctors for the hospital. If we are to believe that to be the case, and we would welcome the data to suggest there's a demand by doctors for bed sits with shared facilities in Morriston, we would also welcome the data to support that these doctors would be willing to cycle to and from the hospital 9 at 10 at night or early morning shifts. So let's be realistic, they will have vehicles. Even if the application is restricted to 1 to 3 vehicles, who chooses who can and who cannot have a car? It is unenforceable by the council or by the landlord. The application is for 6 beds, but who would enforce only the 6 tenants and that they wouldn't turn into shared occupancy rooms, and then we could be looking at 12 vehicles. And it's risking the safety of others and overburdening our already overstrained situation. Despite the radius test, there's also already a number of unlicensed HMOs in the street, as not on 3 habitual floors and unregulated. Although we appreciate it's not an issue for this committee, it does mean there's already a lot of multiple vehicle properties in this street. There are also many other serious issues such as sewerage and the increased change impact this would have on our community, but time today does not allow. So in summary, this application falls short of the council's own standards regarding adequate parking, as only 1 space in principle, not 3, is available. We would say it's unrealistic and unenforceable to suggest the tenants would be limited in the number of vehicles, posing a risk to safety of the tenants, pedestrians and other road users. We would strongly ask this committee to refuse this application today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And then we have the applicant, Magnola Quivane, or is it Nigel?
Hello everyone. So I'll be speaking on behalf of Magnola.
Okay,
my
thank you.
partner. I think most
Thank
of my planning officer covered anyway. I hope everyone can hear me clearly, and apologies, I could not attend the meeting today. So I'd like to begin by confirming and emphasising that this proposal fully complies with the council's adopted HMO policies, including parking standards, amenity, room sizes and management arrangements. Whilst I understand the management concerns, there is no technical evidence demonstrating that the proposal will result in unsafe or severe parking. Springfield Street has 2 entrances. It's not a dead end. The Highway Authority has raised no objections towards this, and if I'm being truthfully honest, we've owned the property for over a year and we've never had an issue parking within 10 meters of the property. Parking concerns raised are speculations to inconvenience. HMO residents typically own fewer cars. HMO applicants are statistically less likely to own a car. Many are students, key workers, or young professionals. The proposal The property is located within reasonable walking distance of local services and public transport, no more than a 3-minute walk from a bus station or a 7-minute walk from shops. It's also important to note that a single family dwelling can lawfully generate multiple vehicles. The proposal does not necessarily represent an increase in parking demand compared to the existing use. The alternative for this property would be a 6-bedroom single dwelling, which will almost certainly have the same impact. The proposal aligns with national and local planning objectives to optimize housing supply and provide a range of accommodation types, particularly those who cannot afford self-contained houses, which is a much more significance to the concern of parking inconvenience. In summary, the proposal complies fully with the planning policy, has raised no technical objections from the statutory consultees. There is no evidence that it will result in severe or unsafe parking. I respectfully ask the committee to determine my planning application on planning grounds and in accordance with the adopted policy framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Williams, ward member, you wanted to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak to the committee today. Just to be clear, I represent all 5 Morriston ward members and we fully support the residents in their call for this application to be refused. Strength of feeling is clearly shown with 59 separate households with signatures on the petition and 34 letters of objection. As my resident has clearly pointed out, and you can see the photographs on screen, parking is a lot worse in the evening than it is during the day when we visited for the planning visit. And in fact, in the past, members have used their community budgets to fund the double yellow lines around the junctions of Penrice Street and Towie View Crescent because people were parking indiscriminately on the corners and it was causing real issues and safety concerns. As has been clearly outlined, we are seriously concerned that there is only 1 parking space for 6 people and surely that can't be right. And also to point out that currently there is an Airbnb directly across the road from this property that is being refurbished at the moment. But when that's up and running, that will also have several cars for that household that will look for parking as well. So this will further exacerbate the parking issues if this HMO is agreed. The site visit showed clearly to me that it was very difficult for that van to get on and off the driveway. And when it was getting off the driveway, it's a miracle that it didn't hit some of the parked cars nearby. It also clearly blocked the whole access to the pedestrian highway, which is of course a concern. But one thing that I noted after having the site visit, a concern that came to me was, in the event of a fire, if that vehicle is blocking the only entrance and exit way to that property, surely that's a health and safety concern for us to be considering today. And also in terms of the lack of quality outdoor space for this area, there is only the patio. The rest of the overgrown area is not belonging to this property at all. So that again is a concern. So just to be very clear, in terms of being ward councillors, we do not oppose houses of multiple occupation, but we do oppose a house of multiple occupation in this particular location because it's not fit for that. The street scene does not meet those requirements. 1 space is not enough. And it's worth noting that the applicant has fenced off the premises, the land next to the property. They don't own that land. I think they're waiting, Chair, for the 12-year rule where they can then take control of that land to add additional parking, which doesn't address the 12 years that they don't own that land. So I hope that the committee will listen to our concerns, and I hope that the committee find it in their hearts to commit to refusing this application today.
Thank you very much. Okay, and any member wish to speak? Got Councillor May, then Councillor Downing.
I've changed my mind. I'm before this land issue is actually a game changer for me. I'm actually going to advocate that this application be refused. There's actually an erroneous statement on page 18 of the report. Where's it gone? The current council policy is such that any dwelling that already has off-road parking, regardless of quantum, is not entitled to apply or hold a residence parking permit. That's baloney. There's a subtraction from the number of available parking spaces that you've got on site. In recent years, it hasn't gone through council. It's been at the whim of the parking service department without consultation of any ward members. The parking services have gone around using sort of Google Maps and everything to look at what provision is off road, whether a house has got a garage. And the first time that residents know about it is when they apply to renew their permit on the My Permit system and they can't get one. And well, there you go. My ears are burning from all the phone calls. But it's not. You've got to ascertain how many on-site parking spaces. So it's a deduction. This property only has one on-site parking space. So they will be able to apply for one residence permit rather than the two. Now, I really would feel quite unsafe if this committee went through and approved it on the basis there is a fundamental error in this report. So I don't know if we can check it, but it is an inaccuracy because it is not what's happening here. I'm a little bit surprised as well that the department has made a an allowance for community connectivity for the relaxation of the three parking spaces, and obviously trying to tick the box as they always do. Let's put some cycle hoops in. We've got cycle hoops all over Brimmill, but we've got weeds growing out of them because nobody uses them. It's just a tick box exercise to get a planning application through. Let's be frank. The topography of it, totally unrealistic that people are all suddenly going to go on the bus in the middle of the night or cycle to work. It's just not going to happen. But as I said, I'd vote approval for it if I was constrained to by the policy framework. But in this case, I'm not, because it's fundamentally wrong what's been written here. So we either defer it and go and get the right answer, or I'm asking the committee to refuse it.
Okay, well, hopefully we can get an answer to that. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose like everybody else that was on the site visit, we seen what the parking was like. So the explanation we want is, or I want, is we say 3 parking spaces. Now we've gone down to 2. Or is it 1? We want to be consistent. And I'm afraid for 3 parking spaces, 1 on site, 2 off site, there would be a problem. The other thing is, it may be in the report and I haven't read it, about emergency exit with 6 people. I could see 1 door. I don't know what's at the back because I wasn't going to take my life in my hands to get round the back. So that's the second one. Whether that comes under here or licensing, I don't know. And the other one is the 2 windows on the southern side. What would they be? Because they will be facing somebody else's land, because this land is not theirs. So if we put in, I don't know, the right sort of windows, otherwise anybody can look in, because once that wooden fence goes, it's open to everybody. So those are the only questions I got at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a lot of sympathy with the residents. I have HMOs in my ward where the parking issue is as bad or worse than this. I tried to oppose them. The committee said it's within policy. I couldn't do much about it. And I have in exactly the same situation here. In fact, I know the reference was made to parking because on page 18, I think, it actually says it is considered that 6 or fewer bed HMO is likely to generate a similar level of parking demand to the existing 3-bedroom house. The existing house has now been confirmed. So that's basically what they're saying is that the parking provision is similar to a 3-bedroom house, and in that sense, as I understand it, it does meet the policy in terms of parking. And then on page 16, and I just want some clarification on this, as I understand it, means of escape it lies with the licensing authority. they would have to determine that. And as I understand it, with a 3-storey property, it will require additional means of escape to be installed in it. So I think that the concern about being able to get past a van or something may well be met by that, but if we could confirm that particular aspect. But given the situation, in terms of the number of HMOs in the area, as we are officially aware of, given the fact that it meets the parking standards, given the fact that there's no real reason to turn this down in terms of policy, and given the fact that we have so many other HMOs, particularly in my ward, where we have exactly the same situation where people are not able to park, and we have residents parking and they still can't park, I think we don't have any option but to approve this.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? No? Okay. I'll have a couple of points there. Access, highways.
Yeah, I'll deal with the non-highway first, because I think we do have colleagues in the highways department. So going back, Councillor Downing, regarding the windows of overlooking, you are quite right. There's been a change of ownership now, so we don't know who owns that kind of land. It's not owned by the applicant. So it could be looking at third-party land. That land is quite a small kind of space, if you know what I mean. And then alongside that, you've got the blank side elevation of the commercial unit, and then you've got a kind of a hedgerow or a boundary treatment alongside it. We did give consideration the windows. I think one of them will serve an ensuite like bathroom, and one will serve a bedroom. So one is a habitable room and one is a non-habitable room. So we did think about the habitable room kind of scenario. But then we also look at it when you who visited the site yesterday, a lot of properties are built up to the footway. So you have most of the properties would have maybe a doorway at the front entrance and most likely a primary large window at the front, which immediately is alongside the footway. So anybody who walks up and down that will have that kind of level of interaction with houses. I see that no different as the interaction between the side-facing window and somebody's third-party land. So we did look at it, the impact on amenity, but the issue of that is no different than somebody walking up and down the footway having that interaction with other people's. There's probably countless examples along this street, and especially down the adjoining street, which is Pleasant, that you'll have a lot of properties where there's a close relationship between public interaction and kind of the interaction with habitable spaces. So that is one thing. We've took that into the balance. That's why I mentioned in the presentation that we've taken a careful look at that. Before going on to highway comments, because I got my colleague in the highways department on that, Councillor Black's interpretation is quite correct of how the parking standards are calculated. So the parking standards is set into supplementary planning guidance, which has got its own supplementary planning guidance on parking. And then that is also repeated in a supplementary planning guidance for houses in multiple occupation. So for small HMOs, which is C4 use class, proposals for the conversion of a property to C4 use class will be subject to the same maximum parking standards that apply to C3 dwelling houses. So what that means is a 3-bedroom plus dwelling, maximum standard would be 3 parking spaces. But it would be odd because the SPG says it's considered to be the same standard for HMO, you've got to apply a parity. Otherwise, you'd have an odd scenario where you're holding HMOs to a higher regard when that could be a dwelling house for 3+ bedrooms at the moment. And at the moment, they're suggesting the loft is a storage, the basement. So this property is at least a 3-bedroom property, if not more, which could be occupied by a family house or a very large house. So that is why the standards are set, okay? So these SPGs, they've gone through that kind of public scrutiny. It's been kind of endorsed by the planning committee and everything like that. So that is the standard that I wanted to set to you, is that it's not comparing apple and pears here. The SPG says that you've got to compare them as parity. So it's not plucking figures out of the air here now. You have to follow the evidence. So Matt, a colleague in the highway officer, may be able to answer some of the other questions on highways that you've asked. Thank you, Chair.
Matt, have we got?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Eileen.
Thank you.
Eileen explained how the parking SPG works. He's quite correct in that you consider up to a 6-bedroom HMO to be the same as a dwelling house, which would mean a maximum requirement of 3 spaces in this regard. Now, how are those 3 spaces? If it were a new house, then yeah, we'd be looking for 3 off-road spaces, but it isn't a new house. It's an existing building in an existing street. So as far as the policy is concerned and the highway authority's view of that, there's no difference in the parking demand for the existing use and for the proposed use. So we've got no real comment to make on that. Councillor May raised an issue with RP policy. He's quite correct. I think the wording is that properties that have private off-road parking, whether that be garages, driveways, hard standings, for more than one vehicle, will not qualify for any residence permits. And if you've got private off-road parking that can accommodate 1 vehicle, you would qualify for 1 residence permit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Cheers. No one else to speak? No? Go on. Yeah.
I'm still lost about the parking, to be quite honest. You baffled me there. You're saying it's the same as a 3-bedroom, which is 3 parking, but you haven't said no. We'll accept 1 or 2. So I'm still stuck with 3. And the other one about the houses abutting the pavements. How many of them are bedrooms? So I don't know if the officer's been down the street to see if he's looking into a bedroom. Because one of these windows is a bedroom, the other is a bathroom, which is like any other bathroom, you can't look in, but the other one's a bedroom. So I wouldn't want to get anybody looking into my bedroom, but they can look into my parking shed.
Well, thank you. Jonathan, I know you wanted to come in here.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer Councillor Black's point regarding the means of escape, that is covered under the licensing requirements, so will be dealt with at that point if it is approved. Thank you.
I think the standard is there should be a 30-minute protected route from all the levels. So it may well be they might have to put an external staircase on that, depending on the licensing authority.
Yeah. All right, I'm looking up the room. Sorry?
No.
You're done. Thank you. Sorry.
Come back in, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to go back to Councillor Downing's point about number of parking spaces provided. I think whilst there's only 1 off-road parking space, I think the key consideration here, and in line with the policy, is that is exactly the same single off-road parking space for the existing use and the proposed use, and both uses have the same parking demand. So both uses could generate the same number of parked cars and cater for those parked cars with the same number of parking spaces. So the Highway Authority has no objection to make at all in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Ready to come back, Chair. But yeah, I'm happy with the 1 off-road, but there were 1 on-road, but there was 2 off-road originally. I want to know what's gone wrong with the 2 off-roads.
I believe one of them was shown not to be in the applicant's ownership. I think that was the issue, wasn't it?
Yep.
It's the other side of the building.
But that doesn't mean it's okay.
It still means that whether it's in his ownership or not, Councillor, it still means that the extant position and the proposed position is exactly the same.
Councillor May.
Sorry, I've just got another question about these cycle hoops. Sorry, a bike store or whatever it is, but the principle of what I'm going to say, when we visited the property, we noticed there was like a thin driveway there, didn't have much length on it, and then it was steep, step down. Now, when you're saying we're going to put some cycle hoops there, the car, if it was in situ, would actually be physically blocking the cycles being able to come out onto the road because that area is so constrained. So does the policy say, oh, you just got to plonk 6 metal hoops down and you've ticked the box? Or have you actually got to be able to get to the cycles? Because if that car's in there, they're going to have to hoof them over the roof, aren't they? How are you going to get the bike out?
That's a fair point. It's a logistical issue. Yes, absolutely. Cars vary in size as well. Looking at aerial street view and the Google Street View, it seems to me that this parcel of land alongside it has been used for parking for many, many years. And it seems to me that there's been a different car that's been used there, some large, some small. The smaller the car, the more space that you would have to be able to do it. Yes, admittedly that when you've got something on a lower level, you've obviously got to cater the bike to be able to go down there. But in all fairness, when I looked at it, at the moment, the steps going down doesn't look to be in particular good condition. It doesn't stop from a homeowner in improving that to increase the space to be able to do it. They might be able to offer some challenges there. We do have a planning condition to require agreement of the cycle and business lands. So they've shown it to be in a rear position. If they were able to demonstrate that there is more of an accessible location that could cater it closer to the property, or they've created an arrangement where they can show that there'll be better steps to be able to do it, that's something that can be achieved. So from your perspective, I appreciate that you may consider that it could be a tick box exercise, but at the same time, I have to look at it in the context of what Planning Policy Wales is saying. Planning policy is all about reducing reliance on parking and encouraging more sustainable modes. Sometimes it's going to be difficult to achieve everything, but at least there is by improving this and increasing cycle stands, you're actually encouraging people to do it. And part of that is that shift change from moving people's mentality. If they don't have access to car parking, for example, we've got to make sure that they have the ability, or at least use sustainable modes. And I guess that is the thrust of Planning Policy Wales. Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Will. Okay, the recommendation before us is that this application is approved. Would you?
Okay, I'm just going to take the vote.
Yeah.
Councillor Meyer Baker. Councillor Baker, you.
Aye, approve.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor Adam Davis.
Against.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Against.
Councillor Mary Jones.
For.
Councillor Nicola Matthews.
Against.
Councillor Peter May.
Abstain.
Councillor Mark Tribe.
Against.
Councillor Mike White.
Against.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
Oh,
That's 4 for, 5 against and 1 abstention. Let me just check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against and 1 abstention.
okay. So, yeah, thank you very much, Alison. Now we would need reasons for the refusal. Okay, then, yeah. So you want to bring it, we'll bring it back next month, or?
Yeah, so under the two-stage voting process, if councillors can indicate what they think the reasons for refusal should be, we will prepare a report to bring it back to the next planning committee where those reasons can be formulated by us and voted upon again by committee members at the next meeting. So if you could just give us an indication of what your reason for refusal is, or reasons, then we can take the report away and work on that.
I don't know what the others, Chair, but obviously I mentioned mine when I was talking about it, is the parking. You haven't convinced me that 2 parking spaces is sufficient for a HMO of this size. And that's the only objection I've got, and I wasn't convinced by the officers.
Anyone
I
else?
don't know if anybody got any.
I echo Phil Downey's
Sorry.
comments. Apologies.
Right, I've got Adam Davis, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, just echoing Councillor Downing's comments. I do not feel that this is the policy being enacted accurately, and I would like to drill into that a bit deeper, to be honest with you. I don't see how we can go from having the maximum provision of 3, which is then not provided, there being confusion around the previous application of 2, and now 1 being sufficient for a HMO of 6 people. So I would like more clarification on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anyone else. No? No one else? Okay, well, we do need those reasons for refusal, so please, can we get them in ASAP? So we can bring the item back to the next meeting.
Yeah, if I could, so Councillor Downing mentioned something about parking there. You mentioned 2 parking spaces, so I'm just wondering, the scheme is proposing 1 parking space, just on that. But I get the thrust of what you're trying to say is that you believe that there may be insufficient parking by the scheme. If that is the case, I guess if you're happy for me to work on that kind of basis, we can bring it back to you with a reasoning around lack of parking.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And then we move on to the next item, item 2, and that's at New Bethel Church, and it's you to begin with.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. In relation to this listed building application, I will introduce the application and give an overview of the proposed development and a summary of objections that have been received. And then Steve Smith, who is the Council's placemaking and heritage lead, will present the application in more detail and via a PowerPoint presentation. There have been 2 late representations received. They've been noted in the update sheet and have been responded to accordingly. So the application was called in for determination of planning committee by the local ward members, and the objection threshold was met. Whilst the application was subsequently uncalled, it has been resolved that due to the level of public interest, it should be determined by members of the planning committee. Can we have the next slide, please, Chris? The application property comprises a Grade 2 listed property, formerly known as Bethel Church, sited along Carnglass Road in Sketty. The Grade 2 listed property is surrounded by hard and soft landscaping with pedestrian and vehicle access via a tarmac driveway to the front of the site. And adjacent to the property lies a graveyard which forms part of the former Bethel Church. The application has been submitted as a result of enforcement investigations and now seeks listed building consent to retain and complete internal alterations and adaptations to form a youth activity centre, part-time education centre and a place of worship for the teaching of the Islamic faith. The application is also supported by a heritage impact assessment, which details the proposed works. So the current proposals for the internal alterations and adaptations include the completion of the pew removal, levelling of ground floor, insertion of new first floor structure and internal repairs. The application originally included external alterations to the site, including the erection of a 1.8 metre close-boarded timber fence around the boundary of the site. However, the application and submitted plans were subsequently amended to admit the external alterations, including the fence, and now only includes internal alterations to the building. We've had a number of consultation responses from the Historic Building and Places, HENEB, Council for British Archaeology, Ecology, Public Rights of Way, all of which have raised no objections to the development. Whilst the Victorian Society did initially raise an objection, they were consulted on the amended details and no further objections have been received. And the Public Rights of Way Department have confirmed there is no public right of way through the site. It's noted that 118 objections have been received in relation to this application, all of which have been summarised in the officer's report on page 46 of the agenda pack. It's important to note that a number of the objections and concerns raised relating to the use of the building, parking, noise and disturbance and occupiers of the building, all of which are not material planning considerations to this application, which seeks listed building consent for the internal works of the Grade 2 listed building only. These concerns would be addressed under a separate application, but this type of application is not before you for decision today. All objections raised have been addressed in detail in the officer's report under response to objectors on page 48 of the agenda pack. Therefore, I'd like to advise and remind members that this is an application for listed building consent only, and therefore only considers the works undertaken to the listed building and assesses their impact on the special architectural and historic interest of the listed building. The application only relates to the internal works of the listed building and does not include any works to the external facade, graveyard or land located around the listed building. Whilst the unauthorised works were undertaken prior to securing the relevant listed building consent, this application seeks to repair, reinstate and mitigate the actions that have already been undertaken. Following negotiation with the Council's Heritage Officer and assessment of the amended proposals, the works are considered acceptable subject to conditions. I'll now hand you over to Steve Smith, who will take you through the proposals in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Steve?
Okay, thank you, Hayley. Just staying on this slide for now. Firstly, let's start with some background information on the chapel. So it was Grade 2 listed by CADU in 1993. They didn't cite the reasons for listing in the CADU designation information, but it does indicate that this chapel dates from circa 1840 and was a rebuild of an earlier 1770s chapel. The CADU description, which is for identification purposes only, focuses on the external character of the listed building, and there's no reference in the CADU information to the interior. But I should stress the whole building is listed, but that's just the information that CADU publish online. As you heard from Hayley, some of the past consents from this chapel, and they're in the agenda report there, include alterations to the front boundary wall in 2002, the side extension for a modern kitchen and toilet facilities in 2009, and more recently a new retaining wall to the rear in 2024. So the full details are in the report there with the planning references. Broadly, you can see on the screen up there behind you that the chapel comprises of 3 parts. There's the modern kitchen extension to the left. In the middle is an open plan. In the centre of the building layout is an open plan hall, and the main chapel space with the balcony is on the right-hand side on the plans there. We'll show you a few more on the later slides. Internally, the chapel comprises a sloping ground floor with fixed pews, a 3-sided balcony that runs around the 3 sides, stopping and gapping for the organ. There's an ornate balustrade. There's wall plaques at ground floor level below the balcony. The ceiling is ornate. There's full height single glazed windows, a raised set vower area, and the pulpit and organ. So we know it was sold around autumn 2022. And then in summer 2024, the unauthorised works were reported for the council, which included pew removal of the entrance gates off Carnglass Road, and engineering works to the rear externally. So the pew removal was halted, and the pews were required to be stored safely inside the building pending the application being submitted. The engineering works resulted in a separate listed building consent application I've referred to for the retaining wall, and the gates were confirmed as being stored securely, safely within the building. Next slide, please, Chris. So, sorry, can we go back one? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself there. So in terms of the listed building consent application for determination today, this is, as you heard, is completion of pew removal, levelling of the ground floor, and a new internal first floor structure with internal repairs. So you've heard before there's no external alterations to the building or within the wider grounds, and you've also heard that there's no change of planning use to the building. It stays within planning use class D1. So the listed building consent application must be determined against legislation, which is set as the Historic Environment of Wales Act of 2023. This requires that alterations are authorised in section 88, and that in determining the applications, special regard is paid to the desirability of preserving the listed building and any features of special architectural or historic interest that the building possesses. That's set in legislation section 96 and mirrored in the LDP. So in the agenda report, that sets out an assessment of the comments received, the past listed building consent alterations, an assessment of the current proposed internal alterations that have been negotiated to be considered to be acceptable, and recommendations for approval with conditions. Right, next slide, please, Chris.
So the next set of slides is a series of photographic images. Hopefully you can see them close up enough on the screens over there, taken by the applicant's architect, showing the situation internally following the cessation of unauthorised works. So that was where work had started without consent to remove the internal fixed pews from the ground and balcony floor levels. Those pews are now stored inside the building. The organ, the pulpit, the set vower, the wall plaques, the balcony, the ceiling all remain in situ as shown in those photographs. There is signs of water ingress in the building in the bottom left image to the right of the organ. You can see at high level there. That's where there's rot starting, possibly some mold developing there because of the lack of maintenance, probably due to gutters on the outside. Next slide, please. So these are some more images provided by the applicant's architect. This confirms that the metal gates that are stored inside the building at the vehicular entrance there will be reinstated as like-for-like work. It also shows the view upstairs from the balcony that the ceiling remains intact and is to be retained. Next slide, please. So internally below the balcony, the wall plaques are shown in these images here. They are confirmed to be retained and conditions are recommended to ensure that they are protected during work. And also you can see on the left-hand image there some of the pews that are currently stored within the building. Next slide, please. So a series of images on this page here, again, provided by the applicant's architect. Top left shows some of the pews that are still in situ. That's upstairs on the balcony, the kind of corner pew area. The top middle are the stained glass windows at the vestibule entrances, which are confirmed to be retained. The top right is the organ, which is proposed to be retained, and you can see the signs of water ingress there to the right-hand side of that image. Bottom left is the metal gates stored safely within the building, and bottom right is another example of the corner pews that are proposed to be retained at balcony level. Right, next slide, please. So the next sequence of plans can present both the existing plans and then the proposed plans. So currently on screen here is the existing ground floor plan. This shows the layout of the chapel before the pew removal work started. You can see to the very left of the image is the modern extension built consented circa 2009 for the extension with toilets. In the middle is the open plan hall space, annotated as Hall 2. And the main chapel is on the right-hand side there, annotated as Hall 1. So that shows the layout of the pews, the organ, the pulpit, set vower, and also, it's probably too small on the screen there, there's various annotations, including the stained glass and the wall plaques. Next slide, please. So this is the same ground floor location with the proposals now shown. The initial proposals submitted as part of the application were considered to be unacceptable. The original initial proposals, it proposed extensive subdivision of the side hall, the sort of the middle hall space, and the main chapel. So that was unacceptable due to the harm to the character of the interior of the listed building, and we sought to negotiate the application. So there's no changes to the kitchen. Sorry, there's no changes now to the side hall area, the open plan space in the middle. There's a small change to the modern kitchen extension, changing what was an internal storeroom to create additional toilets. So the main changes are within the main chapel space. It's important to start by being very clear on the key features that are being retained that are central to the character and special interest of this listed building. So the plans show and annotate the retention of the raised set vower area, the pulpit, the organ, the balcony columns, the entrance vestibules with stained glass, the stairs to the first floor balcony level, and the wall plaques. They are all confirmed to be retained. So the changes proposed at ground floor level within the main chapel space include completion of pew removal, and it was expand upon this. This is not total pew removal. As you can see on the plans there, we would not accept total pew removal because they're part of the character and historic fabric of the listed building. So to balance the creation of a flexible space for sustainable reuse, we've negotiated the reinstatement of the rear row of 3 pews, as you can see on the plan there, which is to the top of the hall space there. And also reinstatement of pews up on the upper floor level on the balcony level, which is shown on a later slide in those corner locations. There's also a condition recommended to agree the reuse of pew timbers in the building, such as loose benches, various cabinets and carpentry and other features, to reuse as much of the timber as possible, but fully accepting, as per other listed building applications, that if this is consented, we can't ensure total timber reuse because there's just simply so much of it. The other main alteration proposed on this level is, on this ground floor plan, is levelling of the sloping floor. The chapel had a very gentle slope which is characteristic of some chapels, not all chapels necessarily, but in order for flexible community use of the building, the floor is proposed to be levelled, which is shown, it should be visible as a faint red outline on the screen there. It's just about legible, yep. So that's the area where the floor is proposed to be levelled underneath where the pews have been removed. So that's considered to be acceptable for that flexible use. But we need, with recommended conditions showing how the new floor would meet the retained floor underneath the set vowel area. And it's important to understand the interfaces in terms of what is a new floor, meeting a suspended timber floor, and how ventilation is ensured to control risks of rot and moisture. So there's an in principle possible issue here, but it can be resolved via conditions. And also conditions are recommended for recording works of the interior prior to starting work and archaeological monitoring of groundworks, because we know this is the second or a rebuilding of an earlier chapel. So there may be archaeological remains of the earlier chapel, and there may have possibly been burials in this area. So we need to have groundworks monitored, which is a recommendation by HENEB as the council's archaeological advisor. There's also a condition recommended for internal redecoration, which will ensure that the timber wall panelling is reinstated and the colours are controlled as well to be sensitive to the character of the listed building. And before we move on, I think it's helpful just to put this application in the context of other listed building consent applications. So firstly, you need to very clearly state that every listed building consent application is assessed and determined on its own merits. However, it is helpful to highlight other listed buildings in Swansea where similar works, including pew removal, have been consented and the work has been completed positively, including the reuse of timbers. So they are highlighted in the report, and I'll just read through them quickly here. So some of the other chapels or former religious buildings where similar works have been consented include the New Silo Chapel in Landor, which is grade 2 star, bearing in mind that New Bethel Chapel is grade 2. So in New Silo Chapel, the ground floor pews have been consented to be removed to facilitate modern religious use as flexible spaces. That work has been consented and completed. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church on the Kingsway, also grade 2 star. Very similar works, consented pew removal to the ground floor for flexible use, modern religious activity there, and work has been positively completed. Both of those have also included reuse of some of those pew timbers as loose benches, as internal carpentry work. You've got Capel Bethlehem in Llansamlet, which has also had pew removal. That's grade 2, pew removal consented, again for continuing religious use, flexible community space. Then you've got the former Brynhavred Chapel, which is also grade 2 listed, where the pew removal has been consented and the addition of a new first floor for conversion to a mosque. And finally, you've got Bethel Chapel in Penclouth, where pew removal and conversion to residential has been consented. That work has not been implemented and the consent has lapsed, but these are all projects or listed buildings where similar changes have been consented. Next slide, please. So the next pair of slides show the existing and proposed first floor plan. So on the existing first floor, you can see the same layout there with the modern kitchen to the left, which has a flat roof. In the middle is the single-story hall, and then the main chapel is annotated as Hall 2 to the right here. This shows the existing basically balcony first floor layout there of pews, the organ, the pulpit, the set vow, the location of the wall plaques as well will be annotated underneath. Next slide, please. So this is the same first floor balcony level plan with the proposal showing. So again, no changes to the roof of the kitchen or the side hall. Originally, the proposals were to fully subdivide this first floor area into a series of corridors and rooms, which was considered unacceptable due to the loss of to the impact on character and loss of historic fabric. So the proposal, and also to fully remove the balcony. That was the original proposals, to actually take the balcony away. So those proposals were rejected and negotiated to fully retain the balcony, which there's a section drawing coming on later, and run a new first floor over the top, supported by new beams set into the masonry walls and new columns inside, and then to create a first floor flexible space with the ceiling fully visible as a feature. The plan also shows, I don't know if Chris could highlight it there, to the sort of the bottom of the plan there, a rectangular cutout space around the organ, which is where the new first floor structure stops short. Yep, there you go. The first floor structure stops short around the balcony and pulpit as the focal point to the chapel interior, and it also shows the retention of the stairs coming up from the ground floor, and the reinstatement in the four corners, or the repair and reinstatement in the four corners of the box pews. So again, just briefly as context, just to reference some other listed building consent applications that have had subdivision consented recently. I've mentioned the former Bryn Chapel, which is a similar arrangement of a new first floor inserted above a retained balcony consented for conversion there to a mosque. Another one there would be the former Castle Cinema, where internal subdivision, including walls and new floors, have been consented in the city centre for new residential homes. The Albert Hall as well, also in the city centre, new floors, new subdivision, new walls consented for conversion to mixed uses, and they're all grade 2 listed buildings. So next slide, please, Chris. So this is a list provided by the applicant's architect here, confirming the treatment of the existing features within the listed building. So it indicates that the features including the organ, the pulpit, the balcony, the timber panelling and the side hall are all to be retained. It indicates that the perimeter wall panelling within the main chapel will be repaired and reinstated, largely because the fixed pews were connected into the timber panelling and that needs to be repaired. The pews are indicated to be removed, but obviously, as I've shown you on the plans here, the areas of pews are to be repaired and reinstated, and there's conditions requiring further reuse of pew timbers, as I mentioned, for loose benches within the building. Next slide, please. So there's a sequence of section drawings now, which better show how this intervention works internally within the listed building. So the left, this image here up on the screen here is the existing sort of long section cut approximately on an east-west axis through the building. Looking towards the rear, it shows the balcony space, the full height space within the main chapel, and also shows how the side hall is single story where no changes are proposed. Next slide, please. So this is that same section looking towards the rear of the chapel, showing the proposed interventions with the balcony retained. I don't know, Chris, if you can highlight the sort of the two angles there where you've got, you know, in a typical chapel, if you're on the ground floor, you've got the slope of the soffit with the balcony above. The balcony is fully retained in terms of the angle there, which is a plastered ceiling, coming down to cast iron columns with the ornate balcony fronts retained. And then the new first floor sits above that. It runs across into the new beams set into the masonry walls at the rear of the balcony either side, and some new columns in the center of the plan there. So effectively, the ornate balcony front becomes a feature at ceiling level to the ground floor. It also shows that the two spaces within the chapel would become open plan areas with no subdivision. Next slide, please. So again, another pair of section drawings, and to show you here, this is a section on an approximate north-south alignment looking within the main chapel space to the east. So you can see the angle of the there on the screen there, there was a projection where the organ that is to be retained is housed projecting at the front of the building. You can see the set bar area, the pulpit area, and also there's a very subtle slope to the floor, which is shown in this drawing here. Next slide, please, Chris. So this is that same section drawing showing the proposals, showing the retention of the balcony, the ornate balcony front, the columns with the new first floor structure above. It also shows, if Chris can highlight, where the first floor structure stops short of the, yeah, so the way Chris is highlighting there, that's where the first floor structure stops short of the retained organ and pulpit, so it creates an open full height space at the focal point internally within the listed building. It also shows the levelling of the ground floor area for that flexible space, where we would need the details of how it meets the new raised suspended floor around the pulpit focal point area. And it also shows to the left-hand side on the ground floor the reinstatement of that area of pews to the rear there. Next slide, please. So second to last slide here. This is a simple diagram which confirms the location of the wall plaques within the building. They're all confirmed to be retained and will be protected by a condition during the works. Final slide, please, Chris. So on this final slide here, it shows the focal point internally within the chapel looking towards the front there. The right-hand image shows the proposals with the retained organ and pulpit, and either side of that, you've got the new first floor structure cut out around those features, retaining them as a full height space at the focal point there. So that's the end of all the images for the presentation there, the applicants, based on the applicant's drawings. So just to sum up, the proposals for the internal alterations to this listed building have been carefully assessed against the relevant legislation and LDP policy. The initial proposals were unacceptable, and these have been positively negotiated to be acceptable. as sensitive internal alterations to the Grade 2 listed building to facilitate sustainable reuse whilst preserving the building, its special architectural character and the historic interest of the designated heritage asset. The recommendation is for approval with conditions to control detail as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Very thorough presentations as usual. My first speaker now is Neil Watkins. Neil, you got 5 minutes, please.
I've been asked as a layman to represent and speak on behalf of the local Sketty community, grave owners and relatives of the thousands buried at Bethel. The widespread unease at what is proposed is reflected in the 118 public objections we understand are lodged with Swansea Council. Bethel is an important and historic landmark and amenity. Contrary to the applicant's claim in their heritage impact assessment, the chapel and cemetery have not lain empty and unused since 2017. There is ample proof that the chapel was functioning until the COVID pandemic struck in 2020, while burials and the interment of ashes have continued since. Can you really trust what the applicants say? The council's planning team have advised us that a listed building consent application, or LBC, essentially considers the impact of proposed works on the special character of a listed building. The actions of the applicants have shown that they are neither responsible nor considerate developers. They have demonstrated scant regard for the chapel's special character, its history or heritage, and have willfully undertaken numerous works without planning permission. The revised Heritage Impact Assessment submitted on the 1st of October asserts that heritage assets should be assessed using appropriate expertise. The chapel's historic 1913 organ certainly requires an expert survey, but has this been done by the applicants? No evidence has been shown. Paragraph 6.11 talks of protecting and improving access to recreational and natural green spaces, yet the applicants seem intent on letting the graveyard they now own fall into neglect and disrepair. Paragraphs 6, 7 and 9 assert without any evidence the facility would not lead to unacceptable parking or traffic problems, and that visitors will be encouraged to use local transport, bicycles and walk to the centre. Local residents challenge these claims. Parking is already a problem. These reassurances ignore the risks of a serious accident with children emerging onto the busy one-way Carnglass road with no pavement to protect them. Surely should the Highways Department not be involved and consulted before any decision is taken today? Paragraph 8 looks at the likely impact on ecology and notes that a bat box is to be provided. This suggests the owners are well aware that the Bethel Chapel houses a roost for bats in its roof space. The roof space the document concedes has not been surveyed. A professional bat survey seems essential before any decision on this LBC application can be considered, surely. Paragraph 11 documents the unauthorised clumsy removal of the chapel's bespoke, irreplaceable wooden pews from a listed building. Please look at the file photographs. Is this a considerate and sensitive developer? Since September, we understand that the owners have had someone living in the chapel building without any consent, permissions or approvals. The individual oversaw the installation of a gas boiler in the chapel without the required LBC consent, we understand. Swansea Council has just served an enforcement notice to evict the individual. Again, we understand. Is this responsible ownership? This has caused great concern in the local community. Following a ceiling collapse in 2021, the previous chapel trustees, supported by a structural engineer's report, declared the building unsafe and requiring repairs costing £500,000. The main chapel entrance was fenced off with a danger sign. The new owners removed the fencing. So is the building this application concerns now safe or not? Add to all of this the known existence of asbestos in the walls and ceiling coverings of the building, timber infestation, plus we understand unacceptable inaccuracies in the planning paperwork. The owners have not adhered to planning rules and have shown scant regard for the historic nature of Bethel. They have repeatedly failed to engage with the local community or grave owners. Indeed, their actions have caused great concern to both. To sum up, this application would certainly harm the special character of the chapel and cemetery, which are inextricably linked. The building is unsafe, It is home to a protected species. Increased traffic and visitors to Bethel would heighten the risk of serious accidents. The applicants have shown repeatedly that they are neither responsible nor considerate developers. No site visit that we are aware of has taken place. We, the local community, grave owners and relatives, appeal for you to vote against it, as granting permission would look to be a reward for continuous rule breaking and willful conduct, and would undoubtedly lead to further damage to the special character of this listed building in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Phil Johnson. Likewise, you got your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. First of all, can I apologise for Ala Tahir, who was my client and forms part of a committee. He's unavailable to attend today. That's the reason I'm here. My views really is basically a statement. I'm the agent for the application, Philip Johnson Architectural Design Services. With regards to the planning application, I worked very closely with Stephen Smith, placemaking heritage lead. I also work very closely with Stuart Hayes, who's the planning officer. I presented what I think is a thorough and concise planning application. And with regards to the application, yeah, there was a lot of work. There were site meetings, and we worked through the application together. With regards to the application, my client had extended, allowed 2 extensions of time because of the level of information that I had to provide over that period. 82 documents have been provided with the application. With regards to the site itself, there's always been a constant improvement and a positivity to deliver this scheme. And yes, I've read the objections. Some of the objections have doubled up, and because the information I provided with superseded drawings, a lot of those objections have been addressed in the application, in the heritage statement. So yes, I think this is a positive move for my client, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak, Chair. Thank you.
Problem. Thank you very much. Councillor Days, one of the ward members. Would you like to address the committee?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to address the committee and for allowing the report to come forward despite the uncalling. And I'm speaking on behalf of all of the Sketty councillors. Clearly, it's a situation which is, as reflected in Neil Watkins's statement, which is attracting a great deal of attention from the public. And the range of concerns which have been identified relate to the fact that Bethel Church clearly has a special place in people's hearts, and strong feelings to preserve for future generations what's there, but also to protect the precious memories of past generations. So from that perspective, that's where the interest and the objections have arisen. I think the other thing which is important to bear in mind is that there is a little bit of a dilemma in that, which I think is summarised by the response by the Council for British Archaeology. At the bottom of page 42, they say, the proposed alterations to the fabric of the building will inevitably cause harm to its historic and architectural character. However, we note that the building is currently in need of a viable use to ensure its future. But nevertheless, it's important that whatever that future is, it should be done sensitively and in a way to protect the heritage and to protect it for future generations. Whilst we're looking at the internal alterations, it's important for us to think in terms of the wider issues as well. Concerns have been expressed about how the application was published, and there are certain allegations relating to non-compliance with previous planning approvals. And there are issues relating to, for example, who is now responsible for addressing those, and whether those non-compliance issues have an impact upon this current application. The objections raised, as indicated, have covered a whole series of aspects, but central to this is the improvement to the internal alterations which is being applied for by the applicant. So, for example, things like the fire exit, the highways issue, which Mr. Watkins has already referred to, which as ward councillors we are addressing anyway with meeting with highways because there are issues surrounding Carnglass Road. Access to the graveyard, structural issues including the presence of asbestos, and I wondered how these are being viewed by planning and how the other aspects of the council's activities would be able to address those in future. A specific issue in relation to the fence, which was mentioned earlier on, that the original application included that, but that's been withdrawn. So one assumes that that's not had planning permission and whether planning permission is needed. I think one of the things that is quite clear is that I don't know how many people around the table have visited the site and know the site, but I'm wondering whether a site visit would be useful in order for the committee itself to see the implications of introducing those alterations might have and how those alterations might or might not be addressed by the applicant. The final question, I suppose, that comes from my perspective is that what would be the implications if this application was turned down? Obviously, you know, there are concerns, and we've heard from the residents that they wouldn't want to see the damage being continued to the building. But what would be the implications if this particular application was turned down? So I would suggest that the committee might wish to consider a site visit in order to ensure that their issues, their questions, the objections raised can be properly aired. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. I am familiar with this site. I once lived in Carnglass Road, and I have actually been inside the chapel on a number of occasions before the pandemic to talk to various meetings. So I am very familiar with this chapel, and it is a very good, well, a nice building, lovely building, and an historic one. I think just so I could just talk to some of the points made by the residents. This committee is not unfamiliar with dealing with retrospective planning applications, and you know, planning law effectively says we have to treat the application as if it's a fresh one. We can't take that into account when determining whether or not we want to pass an application or not. But of course, this isn't about the use of the building. This is about the alterations to the building, to the in terms of its historic preservations. And if this application was rejected, then I think we have to then consider what would happen to the building then. Because you know, if this building was not being occupied and not being used, and I might there refer to the quote, I think, from the Council for British Archaeology, who go on to say, we consider that a communal and religious use for which the building was originally designed is likely to represent the best viable solution for the building's future. And I think that's very important from our perspective when considering these alterations in this. A listed consent is there to protect heritage, and that's why we're considering it here now. So yes, there may well be concerns about what happens to the building going forward. There may well be concerns about structural issues and things like that. There are agencies and as well as the council who deal with those things, but certainly if we give listed consent, then we condition that listed consent, then we can hopefully enforce it and make sure that some of those concerns are being addressed. And just to add to that, concerns about highways, access, the graveyard are not really relevant to this particular application because it is about the internal changes to the chapel itself. So on that basis, Chair, I will be voting for this application.
Thank you, Chair. I also know the building extremely well, and also the graveyard, because as a child I actually played in the graveyard, I'm sorry to say. but as children you don't realise, and it was quite a nice playground. A lot of the points that Councillor Black has made was something that I picked up. Page 42 for the Council for British Archaeology. I think they say it all in their statement. It's very, very sad that we are losing these chapels. The people are not going to use them, and this is a viable application so that it will become a place for the community. And you know, it's just really sorry that we are losing all these buildings, but in this case it's still going to be a place of worship. I think Steve mentioned one in Penclough that's got flats or been converted into, I think it was flats. We've seen them all over the place, Gorsine and different places. So we are still keeping worship in this area. And as Councillor Black said, it is about the internal part. It's not a planning application. It is actually for us to give it listed building consent, and hopefully with the listed building consent, we'll have more control over the works that go on there, and we can take enforcement action if necessary. Thank you.
Councillor Tribe.
Thank you, Chair. I would support Councillor Day's suggestion of a site visit, just to the panel to familiarise ourselves with the site. I do have two concerns: access to the churchyard, that's got to be guaranteed, and also the highways element, where Carnglass Road meets Gower Road. That's hazardous now. Never mind this new project. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In regards to, as I say, for listed building consent building, I've got two of these listed chapels in my ward, and one when I was grateful for the Liberty Church, who based in Devonmouth, come in and took over a new silo. It's a tremendous church, a wonderful building, and I used to worry every evening that was being left, because unfortunately the deacons couldn't carry on with it. They would, you know, they couldn't get any support, perhaps from the Church of Wales, for renovation work. It cost a lot of money, but I was grateful then to Liberty Church to come in and work with Steve and his team, and I think that worked well. On the other hand, with Brynhwyford Chapel, similar to what you're saying there, obviously we're working at going on, you know, and being, you know, working in liaison with the local authority. There were technicality there, problems there. But what I would like to say is that if we could, within the conditions, that we have a proper monitoring of the building to know what's going on there. And I think if that can be written into one of the conditions, Steve, I'd be very, very grateful. So we know then that the applicant know that we are obviously going to be turning up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, if I can just respond to Councillor Tribe. I know you mentioned issues regarding highway safety. Just to be clear, this is a listed building application relating to internal alterations to the building. So we are not considering matters of highway safety today at all. We're only considering whether the proposed internal changes to the listed building are acceptable to the fabric and appearance of the listed building. So there are no external changes, and we cannot consider the things we normally would for planning applications such as highway safety. Well, it's a matter of fact. I mean, John can come in if you want, but
thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's no change of use here, so that the building already has an existing lawful use as a place of worship. So there's no change for this.
I accept that, but at the moment now we have practically no visitors to the site. You will have visitors, presumably in the future.
It already has a lawful use as a place of worship, so that could recommence without any further permission required.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Adam Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to echo just some of the concerns raised by members of the public and members of the committee, but appreciate that today might not necessarily be the forum or the committee for those grievances to be best addressed. Like the Vice Chair, I'd really appreciate if we could have some clarity on how these will be enforced, especially if there's allegations that previous rules and regulations have not been followed. But my specific question does relate to something internally. Regarding the pews that are being reinstated or removed, I appreciate that it's not practical that all will be kept, but the officer said that that they will be repurposed for internal carpentry work. I was just wondering if I could get a bit more detail on that, what that means with regards to what actually happens to these pews and how they might be repurposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Councillor Baker?
I'm wondering about the bats. They said there was bats up in the church steeple, whatever, on the roof. So I'm wondering what they're going to put in place for the bats. And we know out on some of the buildings now, even up by us in St. Tylo's Church, we got sweat boxes attached to the building. So I'm wondering if anything on the ecosystem on that because there's bats there, we know there's protection. So I'm wondering whether this is going to be looked at as well, and where they're going to put these boxes.
Thank you. Councillor Downing?
Yeah, Chair. This is the proper way to look after a church or a chapel, to be quite honest. I've got two in my village. One was ransacked. All the pews were taken before it actually came back in, and now there's houses there. The other church has been done out, looked after. All the pews are still there. And there's another church that's going to be a youth club, and there's going to be a place of worship, and the bishop is 100% behind it. So this is the way that churches and chapels are going. The congregation of this church is 4. So you can't survive with 4. So you've got to look at alternative ways of keeping that building there. And because this is a listed building, that means they can't just do anything to it. It's got to be done under supervision, and it's got to be done the right and proper way. And I think this is the way forward. Otherwise, I think it'll just fall down. Or there'll be houses there.
Was there anything you wanted to come back with, Hayley?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to Councillor Baker and Mr Watkins' issue they rose in terms of bats, Ecology were consulted on the application. They didn't raise any concerns and to say that there's any bats there, but as ecological enhancements in terms of the works, they've suggested some bat boxes be erected in the trees of the graveyard, and that's conditioned as condition 12. There's the local authority not aware of any structural issues. It does say in the update sheet we are aware of some water ingress, but no structural issues. I appreciate what the residents are saying in terms of a criminal offence that they've gone in and done the works. However, the intention of the local authority is to remedy, any unauthorised development, to take enforcement actions in last resort. So therefore, they've submitted this application, which is an acceptable scheme, and any previous non-compliance doesn't have any impact on the determination of this application. Just to go back to Councillor Day, in terms of he raised, obviously we've covered the issues in terms of highway safety and structural concerns and access to the graveyard. In relation to the fence, if a fence was to be erected, that would require planning permission, and if it would only require listed builder consent if it was physically attached to the listed building. In terms of what would happen if we didn't approve this application, obviously the applicant has the opportunity to appeal the refusal, all in while no works are being undertaken to the building, so that could fall into further disrepair and may even become vacant again. So the approval of this application would allow the applicant to move forward with the repairs and under the control of the authority via conditions. Thank you.
Okay, yep, thanks, Hayley. Yeah, just to say a little bit more about the structural kind of comments there. If there are structural concerns, they would initially, in the first instance, be picked up by the council's building control department. And as a listed building, they would liaise with myself if there are concerns raised. But as conservation officer, I haven't had any structural issues raised with myself. There was a question around monitoring and enforcement. There's obviously a raft of conditions in the agenda report there. There's 12 conditions in the report there. They all need to be complied with before further work commences. And as per a number of listed building applications we've got on site, once we know the works are starting, I'm usually out on some of these sites every 2 weeks if necessary, keeping track of what's going on. We also have live enforcement cases for this building, so they will also be keeping an eye on what's going on, and the owner and the owner's team are aware that these issues are now under scrutiny in terms of the custodianship of this building. We talked as well about, well, there was a question mark about pews. They're covered by condition 10 on page 52 of the paper report. I know the numbering online is different, so the PDF version it's maybe page 48 or something. So there's a condition 10 which says no further work shall be undertaken until details of the pews, including the reinstated areas at first floor level, which are those corner pew areas, in the ground floor areas of levelled pews to the rear that we showed in the plans there. We've left it broad in terms of the details of pews to be repurposed, so that's typically a method statement, some sort of agreement. Some could be benches, some could be internal carpentry. We're not being prescriptive, it's to allow creativity, and then whatever's left can be disposed of. So there's a process there to work through. It might be some of those timbers get offered, if they are surplus, to reuse in the building, to local community groups, other ways of repurposing locally rather than total disposal. But that condition there is fairly similar to some of the other listed buildings in terms of the way that these conditions can be worded. And the only point I'd make as well about the comment about bats is, as I've showed you on the plans there, there's no alterations proposed to the roof space. There's no alterations proposed to the ceiling. So there's no disturbance. There shouldn't be any disturbance of that roof void. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, both. Okay, did you want?
Councillor Davis.
Councillor Davis?
Apologies. Thank you for the answer. Appreciate that I'm new to the committee. At what stage would a more finer point be put on those stipulations? Because appreciate that we started at the premise that I believe that the pews were removed. Now they've been reinstated. Now you've just basically given them leeway to do everything and anything within them up to destruction. So I was just wondering at what point are the stipulations more narrowed in, so we're more specific as to what happens to this, because otherwise it just seems that this is a bit of a pointless and unenforceable parameter. So I just wanted to know at what stage would that come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Yeah, in relation to that, we can attach a condition which will request the schedule of work, so they can lay out exactly what they're doing when, and we'll have a bit of a timescale in terms of what they're going to undertake, and we can use that as a monitoring device as well. So if you're happy for that to be conditioned. Yep.
Okay, thank you. But did you want to pursue the site visit, Councillor? We need a seconder for that then, anyone? No? Oh, sorry, that's been take a vote. So,
Yeah, I'll second that.
oh, sorry, Councillor Baker, did you want to speak? No?
No, I was just agreeing, putting my hand up
All
to
right,
say yes
okay.
to a site visit.
Thank you. Okay, so we pick up that then. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a vote on the site visit then. So Councillor Baker for the site visit.
Yes.
Councillor Peter Black.
No.
Councillor Adam Davis.
For.
Councillor Phil Downing.
Against.
Councillor Mary Jones.
Against.
Councillor Nicola Matthews.
For.
Councillor Peter May.
Against.
Councillor Mark Tribe.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
Against.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
I'm against.
Yes, no problem.
2, 3, 4, 4, and 6 against.
Okay, so that's lost. So then now we will take the vote on there, which is one of approval. But just to remind, excuse me, just to remind ourselves, this is an application for listed building consent only. Okay, thank you. And the condition, oh, yeah, beg your pardon. Okay.
Okay, so we're taking a vote on the proposed items with the conditions. So that's Councillor Meyer Baker.
4.
Councillor Peter Black.
4.
Councillor Adam Davis.
4.
Councillor Phil Downing.
4.
Councillor Mary Jones. 4. Councillor Nicola Matthews.
4.
Councillor Peter May.
4.
Councillor Mark Tribe.
Against.
Councillor Mike White.
4.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
And 4.
That's 9 for, 1 against.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And then we move on to the next item on our agenda, which is Davis, 1 Oxford Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I say, third item on the agenda, 1 Oxford Street. So this is the presentation. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Chris. So you'd be familiar with the location of the building. Obviously, we refer to it as the McDonald's building, potentially, overlooking Castle Gardens, which is a well-known structure, prominent building in city centre. It's obviously some prominent buildings in the locality. Obviously, the Storver to the north of the site has just opened. You've got Primark to the southwest, the castle to the east, and some other notable buildings, obviously, and then it abuts the Wine Street Conservation, or the boundary of which is the Castle Gardens. And obviously, you'd be aware that Castle Gardens is in the process of being refurbished as we speak. So the next slide, please, Chris, just to give us some more context. There we go. So there's all overhead. So you can see it's a 4-story building. Not sure when it was built, post-war, I would imagine. It's a tired-looking building. As I say, it's got McDonald's on the ground floor and the Taco Bell outlet. So they'll be retained as part of the development. Next slide, please, Chris, just to give some more context. This one's at ground floor, so obviously you're familiar with that street view. McDonald's, they got 2 entrances as we stand. There's one to the north and one in this photograph. And the next view, there we go. So that's the one view from Princess Way. You'd be familiar then, obviously it's a slightly, not a great location of elevation in terms of townscape. Obviously, there's a substation in the foreground. There's some art features. Beyond that, there's lots of bins which are stored externally, and then you've got the Primark building to the west, and there's a delivery loop road basically, which it will go on to in the presentation now. And then next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so this is the ground floor. So the green area basically is the retained McDonald's area. The grey area is Taco Bell, so they'll be retained. The McDonald's will be reconfigured slightly so that at the minute they occupy the ground floor and the first floor. So in the new scheme, they'll occupy the basement and the ground floor. So the first floor will become part of the scheme. Somebody is that? Was that? No? Sorry. The yellow area basically is the back of house. So you've got various entrances, cycle stores, bin stores, etc. for the residential component. The blue is the relocated substation. And then you've got I'll call it the pink, if you like. There'll be a new retail unit. And then the purple is the bin storage area for Taco Bell, McDonald's, and also it will accommodate the proposed retail kiosks which are being built in Castle Square. Those kiosks will have their own dedicated storage on site in the square, but they'll be that storage will be wheeled to this area so it can be picked up by a delivery vehicle, which will be more convenient so that it doesn't have the vehicle coming onto the square, etc. And then if you go to the next slide, please, Chris. So this is the first floor plan. So I'll call it the pink. They are 1-story apartments, and then the mauve are 2-story apartments, and the yellow is the area behind this building. So that's actually an enclosed area. So that will actually become a potential gym area for the future residents of this development. And then if we go to the next one, Chris. Sorry, yeah. So that's the upper floor again. So you can just see a combination of the pink and the mauve residential. What you'll notice predominantly is most of those units will have an open a single aspect out onto Castle Square. The exception being the ones which are in the extension on the left of the layout. So obviously some of those unfortunately will have some aspect which will look over the delivery yard. The white area to the building is an existing open area which accommodates the plant for McDonald's and Taco Bell. And then if you go on to the next one, Chris. So section drawing, obviously, which gives you some better idea of how the uses relate to the site. So as I said, McDonald's will continue to operate at two levels, and then you've got the yellow, which is sort of back of house circulation access areas, and then the pink and the mauve, obviously the residential units up above. Just to say, obviously, this is for a part conversion scheme, part extension. So the left-hand element is 5-story extension with the retail unit at the ground floor, and there's a 4th floor here which will occupy the roof element. So 4 stories will effectively become, well, it'll become 6 stories in 5 to 6 stories because it's using part of the existing basement area as well. Next slide, please, Chris. So just to give you some context elevations. So obviously this is provided by the developer. Obviously as part of the proposal, the external walls will obviously be reclad with various metal, stone type cladding to not only brighten the aesthetics of the building, but obviously for thermal qualities, water tightness, etc. And then we'll go through some CGIs of what we'll see. So next slide, Chris. I'll just run through. So so there we go. So we've got it's framed, if you like, by the elements on either end of the development with the roof accommodation, obviously in black, if you like, obviously, to give it some definition. And some next image. There we go. So that's the elevation from the north of the site. So you've got Storva to the right-hand side, Castle Gardens to the left. So that'll retain as the McDonald's entrance, to provide good active commercial entrances at ground floor. And if we continue through, and then there's another image viewed from what Castle Square. That image doesn't take account of Castle Square, but obviously it's viewed from where Castle Square is, obviously. So, and the next slides, please, Chris. Some end elevations, another one, and the last one. There we go. So there's a bit of an overhead. So as I say, it'll enhance the townscape, and then obviously with the development of Castle Gardens itself, then obviously a great improvement to the city centre. So we'll go through the report quickly. So obviously all the planning policies, consultation responses are outlined in all detail in the report. Principle of the use. So obviously it's Swansea's central area, strategic development area. Supports a range of regeneration projects. The LDP recognises central area needs a good mix of uses, including retail, residential, leisure, culture, etc. And it supports the development of high-quality buildings and public spaces. Highly sustainable location provides good opportunity to revitalize the site and aspirations of the LDP. And the SCARF document, you'll all be familiar with the SCARF. Obviously, the SCARF, the Swansea Central Area Regeneration Framework, supports city living, increased residential units, city living, improves the level of vibrancy, outside shopping hours, vitality, diversity, and hopefully some spending power into the city centre as well. City living obviously is a key placemaking principle for the city as well, promotes mixed use, conversion of upper floors to vacant upper floors. This isn't, I don't know if it's ever been used, but it's currently vacant, so obviously it's bringing it back into a residential use. 29 units as outlined. I think it's 16 ones, 13 two beds. It's, as far as I'm aware, it's private development. It's not in conjunction with an RSL, but doesn't prohibit that actually taking place. No requirement for affordable housing per se, as it's a conversion of an existing scheme, so it's exempt from affordable housing policy. As I say, the detailed placemaking comments are outlined in the report, fully supported in terms of placemaking and heritage. There is a heritage impact assessment submitted with the application, with the joining the conservation area. As I say, you've got some heritage assets in the near vicinity: Swansea Castle, St Mary's Church, Roski's Pub. There's various heritage buildings in the locality. Won't impact the setting. Cadw are happy with the impact on the ancient monument, which is Swansea Castle. As I say, McDonald's unit will be retained at ground floor, so you've got good, strong, active frontage. So it's provided good quality placemaking in accordance with LDP policy. I say residential amenity issues, good layouts, they all conform to space standards. A lot of them have access to a balcony, so they've got some access to outside space, albeit there's no obviously private amenity space per se within the development apart from the gym, but obviously it's located in the city centre adjacent to the castle gardens, which gives the residents an opportunity to enjoy the outside space. Main entrances which will take place to the flats at ground floor, so it's good legible entrances, safe access to the residential buildings. And so it's good standard residential amenity. Highway issues have been an issue with the application. As I said, there is the delivery yard to the rear of the development. So that's been considered in depth by our highways colleagues. It was a concern, but I think it's been demonstrated now that from a highway safety point of view, the access, obviously the development is extended this way to the south of the site, but it's been demonstrated through tracking that the development can be adequately serviced. There are lots of conditions with regards development management plans, construction management plans. There is an element of highway which would need to be stopped up, which is immediately to the back of the development. So that will be subject to a Section 278 process. Obviously, there is no car parking on site, but it's a city centre development, so it accords with our policy for city centre developments. So it's got cycle storage. As I said, it's got recycling waste storage. It has got an element of a green roof. Ticks the green infrastructure boxes. Biodiversity enhancements will be provided. So just in conclusion, conversion is a residential mixed-use scheme is promoted. Aligns with SCARF regeneration for the city. Residential on the upper floors is obviously a welcome to residential development in the city centre, so that's to be applauded. And overall, good urban scale, accord with LDP policy. So subject to those conditions, it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. And got Phil Baxter, you wish to address the committee? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and Committee, for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Phil Baxter of Asprey Planning, and I represent Carte Holdings as agent for this application. Carte is a development, investment and asset management company based locally in Swansea and very much focused on regenerating Swansea city centre. Some of their previous developments in the city include Princess Quarter, Princess House and another site further along Oxford Street. The current proposals before you is for the conversion, refurbishment and extension of another key building within Swansea city centre. The proposal includes the creation of 29 residential apartments, together with reconfiguration of the existing McDonald's unit and the creation of a further new commercial unit on the ground floor. The proposals not only repurpose a building which is in dire need of updating, but also looks to reinforce and retain the presence of its existing important occupiers, being McDonald's and Taco Bell. The extension to the building will also incorporate the unsightly electrical substation and the external bin storage areas that currently front onto Princess Way at a prominent location, and integrate them into the development footprint in a more orderly and coherent manner, whilst also making provision for the refuse storage demands of the new occupiers of the Castle Gardens development, which is currently under construction. The proposals include the change of use of unoccupied space at the upper floors of the building into city living, and the reconfigured floor plans make more efficient use of the spaces. The proposals are considered to be fully compliant with the aims of the Swansea's Central Area Strategic Policy, which recognises that the regeneration of the Swansea Central Area is a corporate priority of the Council and is at the heart of efforts to drive forward the economy of the whole of the Swansea Bay City region. Carte have worked very closely with your officers from numerous departments for over 2 years to arrive at the scheme before you today. This has involved comprehensive pre-application discussions and a formal PAC consultation process, which has resulted in refinement of the proposals to respond to technical and placemaking concerns. Carte would like to thank officers for their professionalism shown throughout. I'd like to conclude and agree with the officers that the development is acceptable in all planning respects and meets the objectives of Future Wales and the adopted local development plan to reinforce the regeneration ambitions of Swansea City Centre. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Any member wish to speak? No? Councillor,
Can I move the application, Chair?
is there a seconder? It's been seconded, okay. So we take the vote on that then. Thank you. Councillor May, did you want to speak? Did you? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay then. Right. Thank you.
Okay, and proceed with the vote then. Councillor Meyer-Baker.
Approve.
Councillor Peter Black.
For.
Councillor Adam Davis.
For.
Councillor Phil Downing.
For.
Councillor Nicola Matthews.
For.
Councillor Peter May.
For.
Councillor Mark Tribe.
For.
Councillor Mike White.
For.
And Councillor Paul Lloyd.
I'm for.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting. And just one thing, please note the change of date for March meeting. It's a week later. Yeah.